I started going to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago after the semester was over to collect the paintings that were left behind, to reuse the canvases. And a focus emerged, the self-portraits. I started to hang them on the stairwell in my house. Even though I don't know these students, I feel a connection to them.
Hey all, what's going on? You're listening to Chicago Humanities Tapes, the audio extension of the live Chicago Humanities Spring and Fall Festivals. I'm Alisa Rosenthal, and today I'm bringing you my conversation with Chicago-based artist and educator Alberto Aguilar, Chicago Humanities' inaugural artist in residence, made possible by a generous grant from the Terra Foundation for American Arts Art Design Chicago initiative. Art Design Chicago is a special series of events and exhibitions now through 2025. They partner with local organizations to really showcase those creative communities, from museums to your L-Stop to that neighborhood you've always wanted to check out. For more information on Art Design Chicago, head to artdesignchicago.org or check our show notes. Chicago Humanities is partnering with neighborhoods all across the city in our just-announced Fall 2024 season. We'll be collaborating with Pilsen, UIC, Northwestern, Lakeview, and Hyde Park. Join us for amazing conversations with Joan Baez, Malcolm Gladwell, Connie Chung, Eric Larson, R.L. Stein, Jamaica Kincaid, Patti Smith, Randy Rainbow, Tegan and Sarah, and so much more. Tickets are on sale to members September 10th and then available to the general public September 12th. All membership and ticket information is available at chicagohumanities.org. Today's guest, Alberto Aguilar, is a Mexican-American artist known for his powerful and off-the-wall juxtapositions, creating art where you don't expect it. He's coiled water hoses in gardens to look like a sign to those looking for one. He's arranged dozens of donated shoes in front of Centro Romero, Chicago's Refugee and Immigration Aid Center. He's sneakily propped open a side door of the Art Institute, inviting other troublemakers inside. An educator at the School of the Art Institute, as well as a father of four, he draws on the unbridled creativity of young people across a variety of mediums: photography, installation, performance art, painting. He invited me to his home studio to chat about his art-making process, as well as preview Chicago Humanities' free day of events, Pilsen Day Art Experiences, happening on Sunday, September 29th, 2024. Pilsen Day Art Experiences was curated by Alberto, so you can expect everything from live music to a deep dive into the Chicano arts movement to an impressive 50-ingredient mole. Born in Cicero, Aguilar is a 2024 U.S. Latinx Artist Fellow and a recipient of the 3 Arts Award. He has shown at various museums, galleries, storefronts, and street corners around the world, including the Museum of Contemporary Art and the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago, the Queens Museum in New York, El Cosmico Trailer Park in Marfa, Texas, El Lobe in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the I-80 rest stop in Iowa. This is Alberto Aguilar and myself chatting in his home studio with the windows open on a beautiful summer day. Let's see, I am recording. I'm not sure how our levels are, but let's see. Check 1, check 2. Would you mind giving me a check?
Yes, I don't mind giving you a check. Check 1, check 2.
Alberto, hello.
Hi. Hello.
Where are we?
We are in my house in Forest Park, Illinois, at the dining room table in the main space.
And what can you tell me about this table?
This table is on, I guess it's on loan technically, from Brian Sainer and Teresa Pankratz. It's a table that's made out of writing tables from Chicago public schools that were closed down in 2013-14. It's like it's made out of different tables. At the bottom, you could see there's some legs from some of the tables that almost look like cow udders. And there's also like an inscribed story on the surface of the table that's meant to be read by guests to a dinner party.
I immediately noticed this story in the stars, and it's funny that we've set up this massive technological audio setup on this table. Yeah. What kind of things typically happen around this table?
Well, I'm glad, that it could function as a sound studio, a sound equipment holder. I mean, typically what happens here, a little bit of everything happens here. People work on their computers, drawings are made, ping pong is played, but the main thing that happens is dinner. Maybe not in the summertime as much because we eat on the porch.
Yeah.
But dinner's had here. Dinner with my family, but also dinner parties.
Yeah.
One of the things I liked about the table is that it's so big. You could probably fit 12 people on this table.
When I think of a dinner table, this is what I think of.
That's
but
good.
This has so much more.
It doesn't look too messy?
No, it's the perfect amount of messy.
Okay. I say messy because it kind of is like a collage also of different parts.
Yeah, I see multiple tables here. And I think this table is a really interesting place to start because we've just concluded part of a house tour that you've given me. And I was really struck by, I know you work with domesticity a lot in your work, and being in your home and seeing how your family makes creative work just kind of as they breathe or as they do things. How does the domesticity of day-to-day life and the domesticity that you're putting into artwork, how do those play together?
I mean, I would say that component of the work used to be stronger. It used to be a more prominent part of the work. And I think it still is, but not as much because the kids are now older. So, and some of them have gone away. But I think that for me, it was a way. I think when I studied painting at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I remember there was a professor there who one time said, "You can't have kids and be an artist. You just can't do it." And when I heard that, I was kind of confused. And I also, deep down inside, I think that I wanted to prove that idea wrong.
Yeah.
So I ended up having 4 kids, and I probably would have had more if Sonia didn't put a stop to it. But I think it was a slow realization, but I came to realize that in order to be a father who's present and an artist who is able to produce work, I had to sort of combine those two things. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
I combined them, and I made work in the midst of living.
Yeah.
And sometimes in collaboration with the kids.
Yeah. I feel like I know a lot of people who would have pursued art more, but felt like the desire to have a family was at odds with that. So what have been the successes really of having a big family, making art, having that kind of more fluid, non-traditional lifestyle?
The successes are that it's very generative. Do you know, like,
Yeah.
You think, like, I mean, just going back to what this professor said, right? Like, he's saying the opposite. He's proposing this idea that it's not generative, that you won't generate anything. Right. And what I found is that it's extremely generative in many, many ways. Just that I was very prolific, because I was always in the studio. And an idea could come at any given moment, and I can see through that idea. I didn't have to go to a separate studio space to make it. And then it's generative also in the sense that it sort of affects the kids, right? And some of the kids became artists or designers, or at least creative thinkers. So I think that it's generative in those kinds of ways.
Yeah. I think too, something I was really struck by with your work and this house tour too is that there's so much we can learn from young people. And I think I was an educator for years. I did music and drama, and there's a lot that's really inspiring about children. I found it really interesting how your work really pulls from the creative ideas and excitement of your own children and also your students. Can you speak to what is the quality, or what are some of the qualities that we get from young people that perhaps other people aren't? When adults say like they don't like kids, what are they being deprived of really?
Well, I'll start by talking about old people. Going back to these professors, like when I was in school, like there was this thing of like extremely discouraging your students, like that was the approach when I was in art school. It was this idea of like putting your students through complete hardship and squashing them in order for them to first of all, testing whether they're able to be artists, right? I think that was one of the functions of treating the students so harshly and critically. But also, the idea of like having them dig a little deeper. But I felt that a lot of people were squashed. A lot of people didn't pursue art because it was so, the criticism was so harsh. But what I find is that, young people have so much, there's so much promise, there's so much excitement, there's so much clarity that I like to tap into. I love being around that. I don't like being around old people who are, what's the word? When they're jaded, when, they're negative, when they're critical. I don't like that energy. I try to stay as far away from that as possible. I like being around young people who have great ideas and great energy, and I like supporting that. But I also like tapping into that, and like bouncing off of that. So I regularly collaborate with people that are younger than I am. But I think of it as a teaching moment, but I also think of it as a great learning moment. And I think of the classroom that way. Like it's not only about what I could give the students. It's about what I can get from that experience as well. And that's what makes it more exciting. I think sometimes teachers become jaded, right? Because they're just teaching the same old thing, and that's boring. But what happens when new generations of artists and students come in is that it's just new information and new possibilities.
Yeah, being able to tap into that. That's the thing I feel like as adult artists we're all trying to get back to is that kind of unbridled creativity. Mm-hmm. On the house tour, you showed us or you spoke to some self-portraits that you've collected over the years. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to those?
Yeah, I would go, I started this, I don't know when it started. It was probably like right after the pandemic stay-at-home order. I started going to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago after the semester was over to the painting department to collect paintings, to collect the paintings that were left behind, to reuse the canvases or to collect paintings that I liked that I could possibly hang in my house. And like with everything, through time, a focus emerged. And I would say the focus was the self-portraits, because I painted a lot of self-portraits when I was a young student. And to me, there's something very potent in them. Like just that you have this sort of raw expression of the students. You kind of have their presence, you kind of have their spirit in the painting. And so the students would leave these because a lot of times at the end of the semester, because the students aren't from here, they're not from Chicago, they're flying out to wherever, they'll just leave paintings. And my focus ended up becoming the self-portraits because I was drawn to them, and because I've been teaching so long, and I started to hang them on the stairwell in my house to go upstairs, just because I also felt it's a transient space, right? And I just felt like it was a good space to be able to have this contact or have this connection with these students. for me, like I teach all the time, so it's a way to represent my teaching, even though I don't know these students. I feel a connection to them.
Yeah. Is self-portrait typically an early assignment as you're beginning art school?
It tends to be, yeah. It still seems like it's an assignment that's given in the first years of teaching painting. But I think students are just drawn to do it naturally. But yeah, and these probably came out of assignments to do a self-portrait. And one of the things that I do when I see these self-portraits is I try not to judge them, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
I just collect them.
Yeah.
And I think I might think one is bad, but when it's on the wall with all the other ones, it communicates in a different way.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone who was always drawn to art, visual art, performance art, didn't really know where to start?
I think start anywhere, and just be persistent with that thing. I think you could really start anywhere. Like there's something arbitrary about making that I think is amazing. Just that, I mean, painting is the easy. I don't really paint that much anymore. But like if I was to start working on a canvas, right? Like I could make any mark. I could do anything. It could be a really bad mark. And of course, what tends to happen is that you have self-doubt towards that mark. But it's the accumulation of marks and the persistence and the belief that something's going to turn out helps you see that thing through. And you don't know what it is, right? And I'm using painting, but I think it could be related to anything, like taking photos on my phone. Like you could look at my photo roll. Like if I shoot a photo, sometimes I'll shoot it like 30 to 50 times because I shoot one thing at the beginning and I think I have it, but it's not until I shoot it like 30 times that I start to hone in on the picture plane. The light, something happens in the light. I realize something that is the most interesting thing about that image. So I think that has to do with persistence and belief that something is there, but you do have to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, I think that confidence, that's the hard part. The judgment of the mark is the easy part, and then the confidence to move forward, I think, is the hard part.
It is, but it's also not. If you think, I mean, it is a hard thing, but it really just is a state of mind if you think about it. And you get good at it. That's the other thing. You get good at believing in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But you have to put it into practice.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I know that it exists for some people, but for me personally, I don't believe in artistic block at all. Because I do this thing. I think I've set up something in my practice that I'm using the word generative again.
Yeah.
That is generative, that ideas can never stop flowing. Because first of all, I've gotten good at this belief, right? And second of all, I have this sort of persistence. I set up sort of like a generative system so that something always turns out. No matter what I do, something will always turn out.
This is totally in line with everything I know about how people have tried to document and understand creativity. It's kind of the same thing with motivation, right? If you're sitting and not doing anything, you're not going to feel motivated. Once you start being active, you'll magically feel motivated. You reminded me of a quote, I can't remember it verbatim, from Jim Henson of the Muppets. There was a big exhibit on him that came through, I think it was the Museum of Science and Industry a bunch of years ago.
Yeah.
There was a quote on the wall that said, there's always ideas flying around. You just have to be open to catch them. And it sounds like you've figured out how you work and have made that system so that even being in your home and seeing how creative output, right? Seeing how tangible things that you've made that you can share just kind of flow. Mm-hmm. But that comes from somewhere so that you don't have to stress over an artistic block.
Yeah. And
asking
I like
for a friend,
Yeah, no. And I like the word open.
Yeah.
It's a simple word, but,
Yeah.
Remaining open, like I think that's what I'm talking about when like artists, people become jaded, right? It's that they close themselves off. And, it could get really scary too, because you could really get good at closing yourself off. And I personally never want that to happen to me. Like I don't want to close myself off so much that there's nobody around me. One of the reasons, and I have nothing against painting because I still paint occasionally, but I think that's one of the reasons why I decided I didn't want to be a painter, because there was this sort of like loneliness in that way of working that I didn't want to go further with. Like I didn't want to just be in the studio working on these paintings. I know that something amazing would come out of it, but at the sacrifice of something.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that universal desire to, even in like work life, what kind of work do I like doing? How is this sustainable? How is this going to bring me joy as much as I can? Looking at that within artistic life as well. I guess I'd never thought about those kind of nuances between, well, I can do this, I'm talented at this, I could put time into it, but it's not going to give me what I want day to day. And a lot of what I'm hearing is like active decisions to pursue the things that are bringing you joy, pursue the things that you're naturally curious about, and really growing that. And in doing that, that's what's keeping this openness. I mean, it ties back to working with students and working with young people, just the way that they think, right? Is that like, well, that's interesting. I'm not scared of that. Okay, boo, boo, boo.
Yeah.
I noticed something that I wanted to ask you about. I feel like humor pops up a lot in kind of a subtle way in your work, and even in our tour. There's a lot of really interesting layers and juxtapositions. There's, I believe, classical music playing from your bathroom right now. Yeah. And I'm interested in, do you think about humor? Does it just kind of happen? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it just happens naturally. I do think humor is important, and like maybe also referring to it as play. But like I think that for me, play and humor are important to the artistic process because they, again, just make it more enjoyable. Yeah. That's one thing. But I think that life is there's also funny things that happen in life. Yeah. And I observe those things, and sometimes I observe them, accidentally, or just through, like, coincidences happen that are humorous, or but I think in terms of play, like, there's something about play that is like, I was talking about the photo where I put the drying rack over that sort of fake tree when I was in Spain in an apartment. Like, I don't know what that means when you put those two things together, but that sort of funny act of putting something where it doesn't belong, it creates a new meaning. And I think it's through that new meaning or that humor that you connect with the viewer. If there's not like some sort of humor or act of play, you could connect with the viewer, but I like for the viewer to have some sort of revelation or encounter when seeing my work, the same encounter that I have when seeing those two objects that don't belong. Like, I like to share that moment with the viewer, and then that moment sort of conjures something in the viewer, and whatever makes them laugh, makes them joyful.
I noticed with that that photo you showed us of the drying rack with the tree through it, my first thought started going into kind of the story of it and like, who is this character who dries their clothes around a tree? How did the tree get there? Now I'm thinking about the tree. And then I'm like, oh, right, this is a photo. You know, it kind of instantly got me thinking that's such a fun way to connect with someone.
Well, that's connected to this word open that you used earlier. I was writing something the other day about, I'm trying to remember. It was this idea of like keeping things open for the viewer. If I was to make a painting that was very expressive and I just put a certain feeling into it, you know, like I told a very specific kind of narrative, like it has the potential to close the read down a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like if I just put my own emotions into it, right? Into an artwork. Like then it's about that emotion. Where I find that if I just observe and I like be factual even, it's funny because factual is like the opposite of humor. Like sometimes when I make factual moves or I just observe and I don't bring my own emotions into it, and then I put something forth to the viewer, like I feel like there's more of an openness to it where the viewer can bring their own thoughts to it versus me telling somebody what to think.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And this is kind of a perfect segue into the curation that you're doing for Chicago Humanities in just a handful of weeks, a whole day of art and experiences. And would you mind talking through a bit of a preview of what that looks like?
Not at all. Well, first of all, it's an entire day, which I was kind of like, I was a little confused. It was like, all of this is going to happen on one day. But as I went on, it made sense, and it made perfect sense within my practice, you know, to create like an experience that's an all-day experience. And I'm guessing that not everybody's going to stay for the whole thing, but I'll be there. And I'm really excited and about the things that came together for this program, for this day. And just how they came together was a very interesting creative process. You know, the program starts with Museum Church at the National Museum of Mexican Art in the auditorium. We're going to, it's a Sunday, so I thought it was fitting to have like a church, something that feels kind of like a church service. So my good friend Jorge Lucero is going to give a sermon. He's actually a pastor's son, but his sermon is going to be an etymological sermon. So he's going to come in with his etymology dictionary instead of the Bible, and he's going to like dissect one word during the sermon. Jesse Melmed is he's a certified, like he could marry people. What do you call that?
Ordained. I am also ordained. I think I'm technically like ordained Rabbi Rosenthal. I'm not a rabbi, but I am ordained.
Yeah, exactly. He's also ordained, but he in the past married form and content. I don't know what he's going to marry this time, but he could very well marry ideas or marry inanimate objects. And then there's two sound artists that are going to perform, you know, what's equivalent to the worship section of a church. So that's the first program. Then there's going to be like food, you know, like donuts and coffee afterwards, like there is at church sometimes. And then it's going to go right into Harry Gamboa Jr.'s lecture. Harry Gamboa Jr., if you don't know, is a member of ASCO, a group from the 1970s, Chicano artist who did some really amazing radical work that I didn't know anything about. For some reason, I was never exposed to this in art history classes. It was actually my daughter one time sent me an essay, and she said, "You need to read this essay." and it was summertime, and I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm not going to read an essay in the summer. But she kept bothering me about it, and I eventually sat in the hammock and I read this essay, and I was blown away by this work. So she studies at Occidental College in Los Angeles, and this is sort of her focus. Like she really focused in on Asco's work. So I invited the founding member, Harry Gamboa Jr., to give a lecture. And then we're walking over to the gallery, Patch or Pack Gallery. And I invited 6 artists to make response works to the early work of Asco. And from what I understand, Asco, the members were actually still in high school when they started this movement, this group, which goes back to our talking about young artists. They're very well known for this piece called Spray Paint Lakma. They were at the LA County Museum, and they could not, this was in the 70s, they couldn't find any like representation of Chicano artists. So they go to the curator and ask them, why is there no Chicano artist in the museum? And the curator said something like, like Chicano artists are gangbangers and graffiti artists. So that night, the group members spray painted all of their names on the museum, and they have this historic photo of that moment. What's most interesting is that the LA County Museum since has had a giant retrospective of their work and hold many of their works in their collection. So that's happening. 6 artists: Maria Gaspar, Josh Rios, Nancy Sanchez, among others, are gonna sort of represent new versions of these Asco works, or new interpretations of these works. And then the day ends in the parking lot of the National Museum of Mexican Art, where I invited 18 artists to show their cars with installations,
cool.
Cars with stages that have programming in the back, cars that are covered with a giant bandana. There's going to be a variety of things, and it's called Auto Portrait Spectacular. It's a play on words, like self-portrait, auto-portrait. And then the night truly ends with 3 musicians that are going to play on the stage in the parking lot.
Very fun.
And it's moving a little more towards like screamo music or heavy metal music.
Mm-hmm. I mean, metal was just featured in the Olympics opening ceremony.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, Gojira along the Seine.
Wow.
It was metal. So I think it's having a moment. The amount of juxtapositions, and it sounds like a really special day. I know people will come out and have a good time.
Yeah, I'll be there all day long. And I believe that if somebody is there all day long, it will be an experience to remember.
Oh yeah, I've done some of those neighborhood days the whole day. It is like a marathon that feels. You sleep hard the next day.
Yeah.
It's good. I have one last question for you. Since so much of the day, and especially since you'll be there the whole day, you will be meeting a lot of strangers, and I feel like this is something that I've encountered a lot in the stuff you're doing. And here we are. Mm-hmm. We've met once before, but otherwise strangers, And what are you looking forward to in this full day of programming that will really have you engaging with strangers?
Well, that's a good question. I have to think about it. I'm excited to meet people and to hear their responses. It's funny because I didn't used to be into meeting strangers, right? Like I was one of those people that was really uncomfortable in a classroom with classroom discussions, or at a table at a wedding where you're with strangers. But I've kind of gotten good at it because I've thrown myself in those situations. I used to do these dinner parties with strangers back a few years back. And actually, one thing that I forgot to mention is the 50 ingredient mole that's also going to be served, which is my sort of like signature mole that is made up of 50 ingredients this idea of like pushing the boundaries of how many ingredients you could put in a sauce before it falls apart. I always thought of that mole as a metaphor for bringing together strangers. Do you know that? Because I remember when I was doing these dinners, I told my mother that I was gonna make this 50 ingredient mole, and she was like, "It's not gonna work. That's too many ingredients." And then I was like, in the end, it has to taste like something. So I would say that that's what I look forward to. I just look forward to the collage of people that will be there, both as the artists showing the cars, right? But also as the people sort of experiencing these moments, and how they respond to it is going to be interesting also.
Well, can't wait. Anything else you wanted to
shout
out?
I could go on and on and on. Oh, well, the last thing I want to shout out is, go see the show at the Cleve Carney Museum at the College of DuPage. I give tours to people. College of DuPage is slightly far from the city, but there's magic over there, and I'm very much into finding magic, and I found the magic in that place, and I actually take people through it. Not just my show, but also the preserve in the back of the college. Like, there's just like a magic energy there that I like to take people to, along with seeing my show, because it also enhances the show experience.
That's perfect. That's all I got.
Yeah. No, thank
Alberto,
you so much.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
For more information on Alberto Aguilar and the day of events he's curated for Chicago Humanities Pilsen Day Art Experiences on September 29th, head to the show notes or directly to chicagohumanities.org to register for the free events. Chicago Humanities Tapes is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Alisa Rosenthal, with production, story editing, and copywriting assistance from the team at Chicago Humanities. New episodes drop every other Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to click follow to be alerted when new episodes are available. If you like what you hear, give us a rating, leave a review, or share your favorite episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode for you. But in the meantime, stay human.